somebody
the body
by
by
removing
of
blood
blood
at
at now
then
then
to flow.
to flow.
I think I'm past Mobile. We have invited anyone who would like to come in to learn about sickle cell, but we were especially concerned about the health personnel and hospitals and agencies, persons who work with sickle cell patients. We feel they should be more knowledgeable about sickle cell. And so our state president, Mrs. Leola Smith from Birmingham, felt that we should start out with our program educating the state about sickle cell.
I'm saying
First, sickle
sickle
cell
cell
flow
flow
different
different
and
and
Blow your whistle again. Hey, blow your whistle again. Blow your whistle.
And the 1985-86 waterfowl stamp is Larry Martin of Jacksonville, Alabama.
At Daisy Lawrence School this morning, 150 students from the 4th through 6th grades were loaded onto buses for a trip most will never forget. This is Kilby Correctional Facility, one of Alabama's maximum security prisons. But today, for a few hours, it became a classroom where the only subject was crime and punishment.
You're at a prison now. The work release program is part of the prison system.
The children were brought here to learn what prison life is really like, to see it simply for what it is.
All we're trying to do now, and we know that this does work, to make them more aware of the criminal justice system and just to let them see it and let them know it exists. I think this is the answer, and that is to educate kids to try to stop it before they get here. Once they get here, it's too late.
Everybody that comes into Kilby, they're a class different.
But while prison officials say the program is not designed to scare the children, it clearly does have an impact on at least some of them.
You don't supposed to do wrong, but I don't want to go in there. I just don't want to go in there.
All of the children we spoke to said they'll remember their visit to this prison, and that's exactly what prison officials are hoping for. They hope they'll remember their visit so well that they'll never want to come back to stay. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News at Kilby Prison.
He was 27 in January 1954. That's the year Milner joined the then Highway Patrol. He's now 57 and is closing out 3 decades of law enforcement service. Milner says the signal point in his 30 years with the troopers was a promotion to sergeant.
I guess the first high point in my career was the day I made sergeant. When I made sergeant, that was the ultimate goal of every trooper, was to be a sergeant. And everybody figured if they made sergeant, that was as high as they'd go. There just wasn't enough spots at the top for everybody to be there. I guess that would be the high point in my career.
That's it? Now you're major, I mean...
Well, being a major is, it's fine, but it takes you out of the flow of the traffic. And I don't know, just being a sergeant really is one of the best jobs in this department. You're right there with the men, and you know what's going on every day. And I'd say post commander was probably my biggest thrill. I enjoyed it more than anything I've ever done.
Major Milner officially retires February 29th. The men in his division call him tough but fair. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
The violence of the 1960s turned an important page in the history of black Americans, and oddly enough may have been the beginning of a new struggle to preserve black heritage. With civil rights came integration and black earned dollars moving out of the black community.
That's actually what happened with integration. You see, if it was actually true civil rights, not only would other parts of Montgomery be developed, but the total community of Montgomery would be developed.
David Bradford heads the Dave Bradford Memorial Community Development Association, named after his father, and different from most other black business organizations.
Mostly with the other associations, they was basically concerned with the business, whereas we're concerned with the total community, the business, the individual, and in particular the youth, which would be the leaders of tomorrow.
But the principal goal is to preserve the black business community, not with managerial techniques, grant information, or major loans, but with the small problems that could bring any small business down.
And we're talking about a light bill and a gas bill and a water bill and a utility to run a week until the next month, rather than going down asking for $500,000 or $1 million from a bank or something. This is just a little small amount of cash they need to keep the cash flow turning so it does not interrupt their service.
The idea of black business survival hinges on money, and with the black business community already struggling an uphill battle against urban decay and high unemployment, keeping the black community participating is in itself a task.
It's a question of convenience, I think, with most people. A little bit more than dedication to a problem.
In the beginning, there was this segregation, and there was two societies functioning within a society. Where blacks had a ready-made structure and also the whites. But we are not saying that the other shopkeepers or the other retailers or wholesalers or the competition is so great that it have taken the business away. They can handle the job, but it's a matter of getting that trade into their shops.
The kind of camaraderie is needed to protect those youngsters who are coming behind.
Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Wow.
gives me a great deal of pleasure to officially announce that Joe Cribbs has legally become a Birmingham Stallion. Joe, congratulations.
Thank you, Joe.
I think it's going to be nice. Okay, at least I'm going to be getting back to playing football and talking about football, because all this talk about courts and judges and lawyers is really been kind of tedious on me, because it's kind of detracted me from my preparations a little bit. I don't think it's a big secret that I have had my problems with the Buffalo Bills management, and I'm not going to, I don't want to get into that thing, because I feel like that it's in the past now, and I don't have to worry about it anyway. I feel like that I had a very successful career in Buffalo. I was able to do the things that I wanted to do on the field. I had great relationships with my players and with my coaching staff. The fans had always treated me nice, and I have nothing but fond memories of Buffalo. But management, we had at times we didn't see eye to eye, and it caused a lot of problems, and it caused a lot of scars, and a lot of those scars still haven't healed. So, I think it's best that I not even talk about it.
Everybody that comes into Kilby, they're class different. All right. We have our segregation inmates down here in these blocks.
That'll start a spark in the steel wool. Isn't that slick? So all we're encouraging teachers to do is really go out into the markets and into the places where they package things and teach them how the American economy works, so that they can be much wiser homemakers. One of the biggest problems in divorce is managing money. So if we can help them and prepare them for life, they're going to have a much more enjoyable life, and we feel that an important part of our responsibility.
All right. That's the truth right there.
Look in your throat. There's the camera. There's the camera.
The charges for medical care and treatment here at the Pri-Med is less than you would find at a hospital emergency room or at a hospital generally. It's to take care of those patients who have minor illnesses or injuries that require treatment and require prompt treatment. Since there is no prior appointment necessary, a patient can come in and see a physician without an unreasonable delay in seeing that physician. Also, any emergency patient will be referred to the emergency room at the Baptist Medical Center for treatment there. And if this is done, there is no charge for the emergency room fee there at the Baptist Medical Center. So the cost of care is much less than usually would be the case.
We must be a voice that is heard from Alabama to Alaska, from America to Africa. We must speak for women.
It's a new voice that's being heard in the Capitol, and it's not being heard much, at least not yet. But the Alabama chapter of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women hopes to change that soon and become a powerful force in state politics. Velma Blackwell founded the Alabama chapter.
Really, it does have a political bent. We are not going to be engaged in partisan politics, but we are seriously interested in getting women in key leadership positions.
And that is the role I see for the Coalition of 100 Black Women. Not necessarily to come up with specific answers to specific questions, but to question those things that ought to be questioned.
But the group is more than just politics. It is designed to address the needs of black women in many ways outside the political arena.
Because I think that's where our real strength is, in the stability and solidity of the black family. If you keep the black family together, you can build a race, and then if you build a race, then you build a state, and then the state, you build a nation. So that's what we're talking about, unity.
This was the first statewide meeting for the chapter since it was founded in 1982. There were not as many people here as some leaders would have liked, but the group is slowly and surely growing. And today their goals seem at least closer than they were yesterday. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Insurance problems.
We are talking about a togetherness, a more viable program for strength. This is what we're concerned about, that we will have a viable statewide program, that all clinics will be doing the same thing, that we can have interaction, and that our networking will work, where we will be able to know what each other are doing, and from state to state, from city to city across the state of Alabama.
This is the first time the Bureau of Land Management has set up an adoption center in Alabama. It's also the largest adoption they've ever had.
We brought in 96 wild horses. About half of them came from Nevada, the other half came out of Wyoming. We brought in 70 wild burros, and they all came out of Arizona.
Wild horses and burros are protected species. They've been multiplying so fast out west, the Department of the Interior is bringing them down south for adoption. The adoption fee for a wild horse is $215 and $130 for a burro. People from Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, and Alabama are adopting the animals quickly. Oddly enough, the most popular adoptees have been the female burros, known as jennies. All of the jennies have been spoken for.
What's unusual, I can't figure out why the burros are going faster. Other than that, this was really a good load of burros. They're in good shape, and I guess people around here are a little more interested in burros than what I thought they'd be.
Tomorrow is the last day for adoption in Montgomery. Casey's stockyards will be open from 8:30 in the morning till 5 in the evening. The Bureau of Land Management will hold another adoption next weekend in Utah, Alabama, with 90 new horses. Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
And I assume Jesse will accomplish some of the things that he hopes to accomplish. I do not think Jesse will be the candidate, will be the nominee of the party. I don't think Jesse believes he will be the nominee of the party. So I'm not fighting that battle, but I am focusing my attention on what I think is a priority item in America today. And that is to turn this country around and get it out of the hands of Ronald Reagan. And we cannot afford to expend our energies doing anything other than working to make sure that this fall we turn the situation around. Walter Mondale has a record that he can stand on. He's a man that we can all trust, a man we can work with. He did it in Tacoma, Washington.
He did it in Pasco. If all of those groups are so dissatisfied, and if all of those groups are willing to come together and mobilize our efforts, jobs and all those kinds of things. And I don't have to talk about the other programs which I'm going to mention in a minute, but you hear a lot of these things. And
The scene was set. A huge crowd waited below. And then it began. The annual Auburn University Engineering Department Egg Drop Contest. For the day, 1,500 high school students came to tour the campus to find out more about engineering courses available and to watch Auburn students attempt to drop an egg from as high as 3.5 stories to the brick floor below, without breaking the egg. Each student was limited to a coat hanger, some balsa wood, cardboard, and glue to fashion a package to sustain the blow. And when it was over, only one egg remained unscrambled after a fall from 3.5 stories. The creator of the winning entry, Tony Smith, an aerospace engineering major from Allentown, Pennsylvania, with a unique V-shaped package. But through it all, some spectators seemed a bit confused. Perhaps they thought this was where the big guys went to school. I'm Bob Howell, WSFA TV News.
It's no news that medical costs have been steadily rising over the years. Last year, medical expenses accounted for more than 10% of the nation's gross national product. What may be news is that doctors are as concerned about the rising cost as their patients are. That's what the president of the Alabama Medical Association, Dr. Hamilton Hutchinson, says, and he admits patients may have trouble accepting that.
I don't blame them for being skeptical, but it is the truth. And not only physicians, but industry, which pays a large percentage of the bill, labor.
And the federal government, which is trying to figure out its own ways to cut the cost of Medicaid. The governmental concern was one reason the American Medical Association voted for the freeze on fees. At the same time, the association is asking doctors to show more consideration for people who may have trouble meeting high medical costs. Still, Dr. Hutchinson says this may not have a big impact on your medical bills.
The reason being that only 19% of the health care bill is our physician fees. However, that is a tremendous bill. Last year it was $322 billion for the country.
He is also quick to point out that rising medical costs have resulted from more than just fees alone. Improved technology, while useful, often has a big price tag. It is expected that about 70 or 80% of the doctors in Alabama will comply with the voluntary freeze on their fees, and it's hoped that will spill over into other areas of health care, eventually meaning lower medical costs all the way around. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
God, the Bible bookstore for people to look into and try to help those people. And he laid the foundation work. And he not only has been given something. Every year we rotate with, say, ministers for invocations, and we remember to give memorials for those who have died from families and friends. And instead of sending flowers, somebody says, I'll plant a tree. I'll donate a tree in the biblical garden for your husband. Or a new baby, if it's a little girl, they'll put it in the Girl Scout area there. And this makes people happy to feel like they have a part in this park.
There are some incompetent people in the classrooms. Not near as many, I think, as most people believe. But if we do what I'm talking about and to identify those people and assess their weaknesses, then correct the weaknesses or else. Now, it can be done. It must be done. An administrator now can document very strong evidence that a teacher or another person should not be in the classroom. And evidence is strong. But with the teacher union having so much money to appeal these cases over and above the tenure board on through the courts, it may cost $50,000 to get rid of an incompetent teacher, and many of those boards simply won't do it.
It's the teacher union. I did hear you say that, right, sir?
Yes, sir. This is one of them. It's the biggest one we have.
AUM's Student Government Association wanted to culminate Black History Month with a speaker who would focus on the future of blacks in the U.S. They chose a former graduate who received his master's degree in public administration, a man who is now a national board member of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the president of the National Conference of Black Mayors, Tuskegee Mayor Johnny Ford.
Proud of where I came from and optimistic about where I'm going.
Mayor Ford became Tuskegee's first black mayor in 1972. It's an office he's held ever since, and he plans to run for re-election this year. His message to each student was to set a goal and work to attain it without asking for a handout.
Make up your minds, for now is the time, young people, to build. Now is the time to be able to walk out of this institution and say to Alabama and say to America, 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 I don't want you to give me anything, just move over and I'll get it for myself. Make up your minds, young people.
Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
The second United States Football League season got underway Sunday. Like the first, there was sloppy play. Birmingham in red fumbles the kickoff. New Jersey's going to get it? Well, no, they don't. Dallas Hickman of the Birmingham Stallions recovers. Cliff Stout, formerly of Pittsburgh, is now the Birmingham quarterback. He throws to former Buffalo running back Joe Cribbs. However, Cribbs coughs up the ball as well. Gregory Johnson recovers for New Jersey. The Generals have a new quarterback, and his name is Brian Sipe, number 17, formerly of the Cleveland Browns. Sipe drops back to pass. He'll find number 89, Sam Bowers. Bowers picks up 20 yards on the play. A few plays later, Generals running back Maurice Carthen goes in for the touchdown, his second of the day. New Jersey beats Birmingham 17-6. A successful debut for New Jersey coach Walt Michaels.
The district attorney and the Montgomery police have been gathering evidence to present to a county grand jury trying to determine why 77-year-old Marie Feeling died 3 days after she was given a bath at this Montgomery nursing home last month. Today it was learned what the autopsy report says.
We were orally advised this afternoon from Dr. Roper that the autopsy will show that Ms. Feeling died as a result of severe burns from scalding.
We understand that there is an investigation and the result will be presented to a Montgomery County grand jury. Can you give us some indication as to where the investigation is headed and what possible charges might be brought?
Our office has been investigating the homicide since Ms. Feeling's death on January 17th. We are looking into possible murder charges, manslaughter charges, or criminal negligent homicide.
The March grand jury is expected to hear the case, and we're told a special county grand jury may be called to hear evidence in the case. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
George Wallace is where he always wanted to be, in the White House discussing policy. Wallace, along with other governors, came here to advise the president on cutting back federal deficits. They want Reagan to increase taxes and slash defense spending before it's too late.
After this election's over, there's going to have to be a real effort on the part of the federal government to bring the deficits under control. Otherwise, the economy of this country is on the basis of is about to collapse.
It was back to the conference for Wallace after his meeting with the president, and again, the governor looked right at home here. Wallace has declined invitations to similar meetings in the past, but says this one is meaningful. He gets a chance to mingle with fellow politicians and put his imprint on policy statements, but what the governor seems to enjoy most is making deals. Wallace says he's working on one of interest to Alabama, but won't disclose what it is.
That is one matter involving lots of money. We were able to work with the proper secretary and the cabinet. That matter may be worked out in Alabama's interest.
Wallace is not alone here representing the state's interest. His wife Lisa accepted a rare public assignment, sitting in on briefings with Nancy Reagan. Eileen Cleary for WSFA TV News at the White House.
People of Alabama on notice, as well as the many other people that I've met in types of we represent is a viewpoint in which we feel both the Republicans or the Democratic parties refuse to deal with. And those are the interests of the economy, the international situations such as that in Lebanon, which we are in adverse positions against the president and the Democratic Party in terms of how they're handling that. and also to let people know that they have now a choice that is outside of the two big parties which are controlled by the interests, the big business interests. Have a few people in mind, prominently a white woman from the West. So if anyone has seen, this is greatly because we recognize that the U.S. economy is not a situation where large amounts of money are no longer made in the industrial sectors of this country. But
hearings for NASA's authorization for 1985, what are some of the important items that will be considered?
That 3 of the flight centers, including Marshall, will be the ones that will be involved in the design and the development of the hardware. Marshall will play a very vital role in this, and he reiterated again it's going to mean a lot of work and a lot of jobs for the Huntsville area.
Captain 406. Thank you for coming.
Wonderful.
Sunshine Center, $700. Influenced by first graduate of the Cal Youth of the Year. Hey. Thank you for letting me participate.
Factors can be attributed to this. One of them, of course, has been the abundant supply of rainfall that has increased hydro. The level of inflation over the past year and a half has been much lower, and this has also had its impact.
October of last year, being posed for consideration of that testimony.
The questions we're asking you today, would your answers be the same as in the pre-file testimony?
Okay.
I will be the only body here. Make up your mind.
It was a day of contrast for the men of the 46th Engineer Battalion. While in Honduras, they routinely had to deal with temperatures in excess of 100 degrees. Today, their outside parade was canceled because of snow flurries. 6 months ago, when they left in obscurity. Today, they were welcomed home in style. The last members of the Engineer Battalion returned from Honduras late last week. After having a chance to get reacquainted with loved ones, they were officially thanked today for their work in Honduras. While in Central America, they completed several major military projects and built structures that will help the civilian population of the country. Commander of the Army Aviation Branch, Major General Bobby Maddox, read a letter he received today from the commander of the Joint Operations in Honduras.
The magnificent accomplishments of the officers and soldiers of the 46 Engineers will forever be remembered both by the Honduran military and by the Honduran people. The troops overcoming extremely adverse weather conditions and operating in a potential hostile, bear-based environment.
The members of the battalion know firsthand about the hostile environment. Two of their fellow soldiers were in a helicopter that was shot down to the Honduras-Nicaragua border last month. But despite the problems they encountered in Honduras, most of the troops say the exercise was a good experience. One soldier told me he knows now that they can go anywhere at any time and carry out their mission. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News on the military beat at Fort Rucker.
If the overwhelming support passing the governor's complicated 10-bill package continues, you'll be on your way to the poll this November to vote on the proposed property and income tax increases. On the personal income tax changes, the administration wants to institute a graduated income tax structure. Right now, after deductions and exemptions, you pay 2% of taxable income less than $1,000, 4% on the next $5,000, and 5% on taxable income more than $6,000. Under the Wallace administration proposal, that maximum 5% tax rate would apply to taxable income from $6,000 to $10,000, then a new graduated tax rate of 6% on $10,000 to $35,000, 6.5% on $35,000 to $50,000, and 7% on all taxable income over $50,000. On corporate income, the Wallace administration wants a simple change from the existing 5% to 6.5% of taxable income. On ad valorem, or property taxes, the administration essentially wants to double what you pay the state. You currently pay 6.5 mills to the state, on top of county and city taxes, with certain exemptions. The administration wants to add another 6 mills with a different set of exemptions. The exemptions mean you won't pay the new additional 6 mills on agricultural and forest property worth less than $500,000. That's market value. You'll pay no new taxes on residential homes worth less than $50,000, and you'll pay no new taxes on businesses worth less than $100,000. All three of these tax increase proposals are constitutional amendments, which means they'll go to the voters for ratification in November if the legislature approves them, and if you approve them, they'll bring in almost $90 million to the education budget and $71 million to the general fund. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
With 29th legislature. The gentleman will have to state his request for ayes and noes after each motion. The gentleman, Mobile, Tuscaloosa. Move the table. From Jefferson, Mr. Biddle.
Mr. Speaker, what this substitute does, it removes the front tag from the original substitute to House Bill 8.
An expected showdown between the Jefferson County horse racing bill and the gambling moratorium measure didn't materialize. Instead, the two bills and their supporters took turns. First up was the moratorium legislation. Its sponsor, Charles Bishop of Jasper, says the state needs to take a look at the rise in legalized gambling. With a few non-controversial changes, that bill passed 25-2. Within a few minutes, the Jefferson County horse racing bill came up. Again, a little controversy or debate. Again, a few minor changes. The vote, 3-2. Only Jefferson County senators voted. Both bills now go to the House. But the Senate wasn't finished with controversy. A House resolution was passed inviting presidential candidate Walter Mondale to speak to lawmakers on Thursday. The Senate leadership supports John Glenn. The upper chamber also changed its rules when it comes to voting legislative pay raises. At the urging of Senator Ted Little of Auburn, senators now must have a roll call vote when voting on increases in their own pay. Of course, these or any of the rules of the Senate can be suspended. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Were present during all these proceedings, and
Fourth-ranked Kentucky came out gunning from the outside as Tennessee's man-to-man defense was collapsing and giving the Cats the outside shots. And it was Big Sam Bowie taking advantage, canning them from the 15 to 20-foot range. He ended the night with 18 points. But Tennessee's 6'11 center Dan Fetterman was countering for the Vols to keep his team close. Kentucky led 23-22 at intermission. In the second half, the Cats looked like they might pull away. The other half of the Twin Towers, Melvin Turpin hit from outside, and it was a 5-point Kentucky lead. That's when Tennessee's defense got ferocious. Willie Burton took the steal all the way for the three-point play. The Vols led 36-33 and would never trail again. Rob Jones was a big part of the win with 11 points and 11 rebounds, taking it right to the hole. But it was Fetterman that did in the Big Blue with 19 points and 12 rebounds as the Vols out-rebounded the Cats by 5 and won it 63-58, Kentucky's fourth loss of the year, all coming on the road in the Southeastern Conference. It was the Wildcats' 11th loss in the last 12 games in Knoxville.
The Atlanta Braves pitchers reported to spring training as much as a week earlier than other teams. It was an attempt to get an early look at the throwers the Braves hope will fill the shoes of 19-year veteran Phil Niekro. Niekro is now a Yankee, but his teammates say they miss more than his knuckleball.
Knowing that he's not around, it's kind of different. Things always happen that are, different, so you just have to get used to him. But, we're going to miss him.
Phil was one of the finest guys that I've ever met. I'd go to him and ask his advice, and we spent some time together having a few beers and eating dinner, and we played cards. We did a lot of things together, and it was a good friend.
This spring, Niekro is in training with the Yankees in Fort Lauderdale, just an hour's drive from the Braves in West Palm Beach. But he says he feels he's in another world.
I close my eyes, and I keep trying to pick up voices I've heard for 4 or 5, 6 years, and they're not there. I'm hearing voices I've never heard before. I don't even know half the guys down here.
When the word came out that he was released, I flew to Atlanta and got the catcher's mitt that I'd caught all those ball games with him and took it home. I'm going to keep it. I don't know if he asked me for it, I'll give it to him, but other than that, it's going to be mine.
In time, he will no doubt acquire a taste for the Big Apple, but in the early days of his transition, Phil Niekro feels like a man without a home.
It's a whole new ball game. It just almost feels like, I'm going to pinch myself, or my wife's going to roll me over and say, hey, wake up, it's, the dream's over.
In a few weeks, this bloom could be a nice, juicy plum. That is, if it survives tonight's freezing temperatures. In this blooming stage, plums and other fruits just don't fare well below 25 degrees.
2 hours of 25-degree weather, 3 hours, it would be real damaging to those blossoms that's open all the way up. But those that's in the pink stage that haven't opened up they should be fairly safe. Might kill a few, just thin them out, and when it warms up, they'll bloom out, and we still should have a good peach crop.
Probably the biggest concern, though, in these parts is for vegetable and flower gardens.
If the plants are real tender, it could burn them, so you can cover them up with some pine straw, or use some newspaper, some old sheets. A lady just called this afternoon, said she had some old sheets. I said, well, get out there and get some brick and dirt on them to make sure it won't blow away, so this will work. So you can cover those little plants up.
It's expected to be a little warmer tomorrow night, 28 degrees, and Mr. Bryant says plants should be out of any real danger by then. Lois Russell, WSFA TV News.
Senator Gary Hart didn't even have a campaign headquarters in the state of Alabama until today. The man billed as the Democratic alternative is running here on strictly volunteer labor, but that will probably change now. State campaign coordinator Joan Bowen.
It has given us the momentum to be able to do a great many more things in Alabama than we have been able to up to now.
Bowen is counting on a lot of changes before Alabama's March 13th primary, because raising money for her candidate hasn't been easy so far, and she says that's made it tough to get Senator Hart's name across to Alabama voters.
Now that Senator Hart is going to be perceived as the prime challenger to Walter Mondale for the nomination, I think it's going to attract us a kind of broad support from all segments of the population, Democratic voters in Alabama.
I think he's electable because he's a fresh face. I think he's electable because he speaks with ideas that haven't been addressed to the American electorate.
Hart as attracting the newer ideas, newer blood, newer initiatives.
Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
And next week there will be caucuses in Maine and in Vermont, but it's the Tuesday a week later, the day they're calling Super Tuesday. That could be the deciding one. National political correspondent Ken Bodie has this report. Ken?
Morning, John. About as sure a thing as there is in American politics is that New Hampshire will cut somebody down to size. But add up all the delegates from Iowa and New Hampshire, throw in the next two contests in Maine and Vermont, and you still have only a fraction of the delegates at stake on Super Tuesday, March 13th. And most of Super Tuesday takes place in the South.
This is Gary Hart's biggest cash box in Alabama.
The cash box at the bar of the Hart headquarters last night in Montgomery gives you a fair idea where Gary Hart stands down here.
In the last week or so, we've raised maybe a couple of $1,000s.
Hart has only been here once since he announced, and that was 6 months ago. He's generating all the interest that comes to a winner, but most of his walk-in organization has never actually seen the candidate.
I have passed the message that, yes, we very much want Senator Hart here. We need him for purposes of campaigning in Alabama.
Also, they've passed out the last of the campaign buttons, but they do have momentum.
We are now the alternative to Walter Mondale.
Not the only alternative. New Hampshire's result also gives John Glenn a mini-resurrection. A third-place finish is nothing much to coast on, but John Glenn still has lots of establishment support in the South. Jesse Jackson hoped to come out of New Hampshire with a little momentum of his own. That didn't work. Jackson finished even behind the write-in for Reagan in New Hampshire, but he still has a southern black base. That's undeniable. Yesterday's frontrunner, Walter Mondale, he'll now find out whether his money, his organization, and his labor support will carry him over, or whether his inevitability was his major asset, and if that evaporates, so does Mondale.
Super Tuesday, 602 delegates. Enough to turn this thing around a couple more times, John.
You can.
The so-called last leg of the Wallace administration general fund package is a bill which will speed up the collection of sales taxes from retailers. But the administration says this won't have any effect on how much sales tax you pay when you buy something.
Is this a Band-Aid approach? Not in my judgment. I think this year is a Band-Aid approach for this year, in that it speeds up the taxes, it accelerates them, but it indeed does not levy a new tax. It's a good cash flow mechanism by which we can move forward with this year's budget.
But the $30 million that this speed up will generate will only be enjoyed once. Then the administration is banking on your accepting the proposed property tax increase to maintain that higher funding in the future. This sales tax collection speed up only meets half of the nearly $60 million in needs in the general fund. The other half was passed by the House yesterday. It's the bill which bumps the annual cost of your car tag from $13.75 to $23.75. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
An emotional moment. That's the way one sergeant described the dedication ceremonies for the Air Force's first Heritage Hall for Enlisted Men and the AC-47 aircraft. For Medal of Honor winner John Levittow, the C-47 brought back memories of when he was wounded in Vietnam while serving as a crew member on an identical plane. Suffering from more than 40 shrapnel wounds, he saved the lives of the crew by covering and then throwing a dangerous magnesium flare out of the plane just moments before it ignited. Levittow says he's just holding the Medal of Honor for other enlisted men.
With this airplane here at the NCO Academy, I think it'll serve as an excellent reminder to the NCOs of their responsibility to the younger men. If I didn't have the training I had, I wouldn't be here today.
Levittow has earned a place in the Heritage Hall that was dedicated by the senior NCO Academy. Commander of Air University, Lieutenant General Charles Cleveland says heritage and history are very important to all servicemen.
We tend to look down the road of progress, and that's natural and that's right. But the direction of that road ahead is determined directly by the direction of the road that you're on and the direction of the road that you came from.
And the Heritage Hall should serve as both a reminder and an inspiration for all enlisted men. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News on the Military Beat.
I'd never heard of Jeffrey Stow until I tuned in the 6 o'clock news Saturday. Reporter Susan Silvernail of our staff had a heartwarming feature on this young man. It was a story that made you feel good. It also made you feel a little sad. Jeffrey Stow is an 8th grade student at Goodwin Junior High School. He's 13 years old, but not for long. He'll be 14 the day after tomorrow. Jeffrey's your typical junior high student. He plays trumpet in the band. He's struggling with 8th grade algebra, and didn't we all? He's not big enough to play football, but he had a chance this spring to be the manager of the team. He turned that down because he had something else to do which he felt was much more important. Jeffrey feels very strongly that something has got to be done to warn teenagers about the dangers of drinking and driving. And he's not real sure adults can do this job as well as young people. As he sees it, a teenager will listen to another teenager. They might not listen to a grown-up. With this in mind, Jeffrey set about to organize a chapter of Students Against Drunk Driving. SAD, it's called. He called his first meeting, but it didn't turn out like he had hoped. Several parents showed up, but the only student there was Jeffrey. A lesser young man might have thrown in the towel right there, but Jeffrey is not a lesser young man. Of course he was disappointed. But when I talked to him last night, that disappointment had been replaced by a determination that there's going to be a SAD chapter at Goodwin. You can put that in the bank. At a time when there seems to be such a scarcity of good news, a time when there seems to be nothing but tragedy and crime and people being unkind to other people, is it not nice when every now and then a Jeffrey Stow comes along? We thank you for that, Jeffrey, and happy birthday on Friday. That's the way we see it tonight.